Aramaic is a family of languages or dialects belonging to the Semitic family. More specifically, it is part of the Northwest Semitic subfamily, which also includes Canaanite languages such as Hebrew and Phoenician. The Aramaic script was widely adopted for other languages and is ancestral to both the Arabic and modern Hebrew alphabets. Accordingly, Jesus Christ, the central figure of Christianity, spoke the Aramaic dialect during his public ministry. During its approximately 3,000 years of written history, Aramaic has served variously as a language of administration of empires and as a language of divine worship. It became the lingua franca of the Neo-Assyrian Empire, Neo-Babylonian Empire, the Achaemenid Empire, the Parthian Empire, and the Sasanian Empire, of the Neo-Assyrian states of Ashur, Adiabene, Osron and Hatra, the Aramaean state of Palmyra, and the day-to-day language of Yehud Medinata and of Judea. It was the language that Jesus supposedly used the most, the language of large sections of the biblical books of Daniel and Ezra, as well as the main language of the Talmud. Aramaic was also the original language of the Bahraini people of eastern Arabia, and of the Mandeans and the Gnostic religion, Mandeanism, as well as the language of the once widespread but now extinct Manichaean religion. The major Aramaic dialect Syriac is the liturgical language of Syriac Christianity, in particular the Church of the East, the Chaldean Catholic Church, the St. Thomas Christian Churches in India, the Syriac Orthodox Church, the Assyrian Pentecostal Church, and the Maronite Church. Aramaic's long history and diverse and widespread use has led to the development of many divergent varieties, which are sometimes considered dialects, though they are distinct enough that they are sometimes considered languages. Therefore, there is not one singular, static Aramaic language. Each time and place rather has had its own variation. Aramaic is retained as a liturgical language by certain Eastern Christian churches, in the form of Syriac, the Aramaic variety by which Eastern Christianity was diffused. Whether or not those communities once spoke it or another form of Aramaic as their vernacular, but have since shifted to another language as their primary community language. Modern Aramaic is spoken today as a first language by many scattered, predominantly small, and largely isolated communities of differing Christian, Jewish, and Mandean ethnic groups of West Asia, most numerously by the Assyrians in the form of Assyrian Neo-Aramaic and Chaldean Neo-Aramaic, that have all retained use of the once dominant lingua franca, despite subsequent language shifts experienced throughout the Middle East. The Aramaic languages are now considered endangered. Etymology. The term Aramaic, meaning the language of Aramaeans settling in the region of ancient Aram, or derives from the Hebrew Aramaic root verb meaning to rise, be high, piled up, or tall. Aram is used as a proper name of several people in the Torah, including descendants of Shem, Abraham and Jacob. Ancient Aram, bordering northern Israel and now called Syria, is considered the linguistic epicenter of Aramaic, the language of the Aramaeans who settled the area during the Bronze Age circa 3500 BC. There is some confusion about the origin of the language, often mistaken to have originated within Assyria. In fact, Aramaeans carried their language and writing into Mesopotamia by voluntary migration, by forced exile of conquering armies, and by nomadic Chaldean invasions of Babylonia in 1200 BC to 1000 BC. Interestingly, the Christian primary text written in Koine Greek, New Testament, translates the word Hebrew as Aramaic. Part of this confusion is attributed to the Greek naming Aram, Syria, and at the same time calling Assyria, Syria. Geographic distribution. During the Neo-Assyrian and the Neo-Babylonian period, Arameans, the native speakers of Aramaic, began to settle in greater numbers, at first in Babylonia, and later in Assyria. The influx eventually resulted in the Neo-Assyrian Empire adopting an Akkadian-influenced Imperial Aramaic as the lingua franca of its empire. This policy was continued by the short-lived Neo-Babylonian Empire and Median Empire, and all three empires became operationally bilingual in written sources, with Aramaic used alongside Akkadian. The Persian Empire continued this tradition, and the extensive influence of these empires led to Aramaic gradually becoming the lingua franca of most of Western Asia, the Arabian Peninsula, Asia Minor, the Caucasus, and Egypt. Aramaic was also the lingua franca of the Parthian Empire. Aramaic writing has been found as far north as Hadrian's Wall in ancient Britain, in the form of inscriptions in Aramaic, made by Assyrian and Aramaean soldiers serving in the Roman legions in northern England during the 2nd century AD. The successor state of the Parthians and thus the new neighboring arch-rival of the Roman Byzantine Empire, the Sasanian Empire, continued with the usage of Aramaic as the lingua franca. From the late 7th century AD to the 14th century AD, Aramaic was gradually replaced as the lingua franca of the Middle East by Arabic. However, Aramaic remains a spoken, literary, and liturgical language among indigenous Assyrians, and also some Jews. It is spoken by the Assyrians of Iraq, northeastern Syria, southeastern Turkey, and northwest Iran, with diaspora communities in Armenia, Georgia, Azerbaijan and southern Russia. Mandaeans also continue to use Aramaic as a liturgical language, as most are now Arabic speakers. There are still also a small number of native speakers of Western Aramaic in isolated villages in western Syria. The turbulence of the last 2 centuries has seen speakers of first language and literary Aramaic dispersed throughout the world. However, there are a number of sizable Assyrian towns in northern Iraq such as Al-Kosh, Bakdida, Bartella, Tel Eskaf, and Tel Kepa, and numerous small villages where Aramaic is still the main spoken language. And many large cities in this region also have Assyrian Aramaic-speaking communities, particularly Mosul, Erbil, Kirkuk, Dohuk, and Hasakah. Aramaic languages and dialects. Aramaic is often spoken of as a single language. However, it is in reality a group of related languages, rather than a single monolithic language, something which it has never been. Some Aramaic languages differ more from each other than the Romance languages do among themselves. Its long history, extensive literature, and use by different religious communities are all factors in the diversification of the language. Some Aramaic dialects are mutually intelligible, whereas others are not unlike the situation with modern varieties of Arabic. Some Aramaic languages are known under different names. For example, Syriac is particularly used to describe the Eastern Aramaic of indigenous Christian ethnic communities of Assyrians in Iraq, southeastern Turkey, northeastern Syria, and northwestern Iran, and St. Thomas Christians in India. Most dialects can be described as either Eastern or Western, the dividing line being roughly the Euphrates, or slightly west of it. It is also helpful to draw a distinction between those Aramaic languages that are modern living languages, those that are still in use as literary languages, and those that are extinct and are only of interest to scholars. Although there are some exceptions to this rule, this classification gives modern, middle, and old periods, alongside Eastern and Western areas, to distinguish between the various languages and dialects that are Aramaic. Writing system. The earliest Aramaic alphabet was based on the Phoenician alphabet. In time, Aramaic developed its distinctive, square, style. The ancient Israelites and other peoples of Canaan adopted this alphabet for writing their own languages. Thus, it is better known as the Hebrew alphabet today. This is the writing system used in Biblical Aramaic and other Jewish writing in Aramaic. The other main writing system used for Aramaic was developed by Christian communities. A cursive form known as the Syriac alphabet, a highly modified form of the Aramaic alphabet, the Mandaic alphabet, is used by the Mandaeans. In addition to these writing systems, certain derivatives of the Aramaic alphabet were used in ancient times by particular groups. Nabatean in Petra, for instance, and Palmyrenian in Palmyra. In modern times, Toro-Yo has sometimes been written in a Latin alphabet. History. The history of Aramaic is broken down into three broad periods. Old Aramaic, including the Biblical Aramaic of the Hebrew Bible, the Aramaic of Jesus. Middle Aramaic, including literary Syriac, the Aramaic of the Talmudim, Targumim, and Midrashim. Mandaic, modern Aramaic, including various modern vernaculars. This classification is based on that used by Klaus Ber***.